Thank you so much for joining us on the Dwelling Show. I'm your host, Ola Dantes. I've got an incredible bunch with us today. I've got Mike Brady and Alex Shadrowski with us today. Hey guys, I think this is the first for the Dwelling Show. Two guests, two in one.
You're outnumbered today.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining, guys. I really appreciate you. So yeah, this is definitely going to be a little bit dynamistic because I've never done this before. So Mike, can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit more about what you do, and then Alex, you can take over from there.
Yeah, sure. So this is Mike Brady. For those of you listening to the audio, there's not a video portion of this. I understand, but
there is a video actually.
Okay, so then you'll be able to see me. That's easier.
Lucky them.
Yeah, my name is Mike Brady. I am Executive Vice President of Madison Exchange. We're a national qualified intermediary for 1031 exchanges. My background is I was a practicing real estate attorney for over 25 years, predominantly handling corporate and some residential transactions. I've probably done several thousand closings during the course of my career. I got involved in the 1031 game pretty early in my career, but joined a qualified intermediary company in 2005, and I've been doing that ever since, most recently with Madison Exchange. And my colleague Alex Shadrowski has joined us, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Yep. So my name is Alex Shadrowski. I do the business development for Madison 1031. My background is actually, I'm originally an educator. I was a rabbi. So Ole, you were in the medical profession. I was in the soul doctor. And then I transitioned to being a small business owner. I built a very large catering company in Silicon Valley. And through the whole time, I was always looking to understand how to be able to build effectively passive income. Real estate is something that always interests me. And the chance to work with Madison has been a great opportunity to be able to develop and educate people about investing. As myself, I look at it from a business owner standpoint. How do we maximize our the profits that we have and reinvest them to build a long-term, multi-generational future? So my approach is I come from as an investor and small business owner perspective, and try to do as much as I can to educate on the topic. And I'm blessed to have Michael, who is has personally deferred over $1 billion of capital gains tax, and by my side to lean on.
Yeah. It's $1 billion on behalf of clients. It's not $1 billion of my own money, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think most listeners would kind of hopefully decipher that. Yeah, sure. So yeah, Alex, I should have started the conversation with shalom. Since you were right.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
we all need the peace.
Yes. I was in Tel Aviv last year. Now I think it was 2019. Beautiful.
I just missed you by 1 year. It's
oh man, yeah, it's a beautiful city. I loved it. We went to Jerusalem as well, and I just had this whole kind of thinking of Israel as just all being like, I don't know what I was thinking, but when I got to Tel Aviv and at the beach, I was like, oh my God, it's amazing, it's beautiful. The food was great as well. So yeah.
Well, it's an open door next time you come. Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Yeah. So, going back to you, Alex. So you basically, you were an educator, and then you had a successful, catering company, and then now kind of in the exchange, 1031 exchange, which we're going to discuss in a bit. How has that transition been for you? And I'm asking this question for somebody who might be doing something totally different, right? Maybe they're out in California, maybe they're a tech person, or maybe they're in the medical field, or maybe a doctor, physician or dentist, whatever, and been thinking of how to make that shift, even if it's from a passive side into a more active as they get older. How has that shift been for you?
I'll tell you, in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, the joke really is you want to be working in Silicon Valley, but living in an island somewhere off the Caribbean. So there's the idea of a digital nomad. So I think one of the beautiful things about working for a company like Madison 1031, which operates in all 50 states, it's we're dealing whole across the country. I can really be anywhere and service the clients through both education, LinkedIn, and this podcast, and also frequent trips to the States. So to me, actually, this has been a real beautiful experience while working in a catering company, which is extremely hands-on. It's very demanding. Working in a company like 1031, Mass 1031, where it could be more remote, has been a big blessing, which I think brings us into a lot of the clients that we're dealing with are property owners who have very their hands are really invested in their properties. They've appreciated due to their hard work, and they're ready to say transition into more of a retirement age and want to park their funds without paying the capital gains on the appreciation of the property into potentially a different property which can be managed by somebody else. I think we're creating digital nomad life for our investors and for our clients all the time. So it's a privilege.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Mike, what is a 1031 exchange? Can you just kind of break it down for us, in baby words for any listeners out there?
So 1031 exchange is designed to let investors, real estate investors, defer their capital gains and avoid paying taxes or defer paying the taxes by buying other property. So essentially you're swapping one property for another. That's the whole purpose of a 1031 exchange. And the recognition is that this is something that's been in the tax code since the 1920s. And the purpose was to have two parties. If Alex and I each had a property the other liked and we traded deeds, there would be no cash involved in that transaction. And as a result, there'd be no cash available to pay taxes. And so recognizing that, they allowed this, what they call exchange concept, so that you don't have to pay taxes in the middle. You can defer it until you ultimately sell and get cash. Okay, so that doesn't happen that often where two parties' interests align like that. So they created something called a qualified intermediary, which is what our company, Madison Exchange, does. And essentially what happens for tax purposes is the taxpayer does a swap with us. So they give us their property for tax purposes. We sell it. We take the proceeds from that sale and buy a property, and we give them that property in exchange for the one they gave us. Now, that's kind of cumbersome, and it would be very involved. And so it's really just sufficient if we take assignment of both contracts of sale on each side, and the money flows through us, so the taxpayer does not touch the money. Once they touch the money, they pay taxes, and that's really what our purpose in the transaction is. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So I'm just kind of putting myself in the shoes of a listener, thinking, oh my goodness. So are you telling me that I can actually, sell my property and then not pay taxes? Is that even legal? Right. So I can just hear somebody, maybe they're kind of fairly new to real estate thinking, why is this even happening? Right. So can you kind of give us a case study of where you've seen this actually happen?
Sure. So you may have, let's say, you mentioned earlier that you just immigrated from California to Texas.
Wow.
Baltimore, Maryland to Houston.
We're talking about California, though, as well.
Yeah.
California, because California is a really high tax state. So if you had an investor who had maybe where Alex is from in Silicon Valley, and they had a rental property, and it's important to note this only applies to commercial rental property. It doesn't apply to your primary residence. So if they had a commercial, let's say they had a rental property in San Francisco, and they sold that property at the height of the market, probably where we are now, and they made a killing on that property, and they were going to pay a lot of taxes, because if you own California property or you're a California resident, not only are you going to pay federal taxes, which, are significant, you're going to pay state income taxes as well. And California has the highest state income taxes in the country. So, basically, if you sold in California, depending on what bracket you're in, about 1/3 or more of your profit is going to be paid out in taxes. Okay. So let's assume they had $1 million profit on their sale. Okay. That means they're going to pay over $300,000 in taxes if they just sell outright. So they decide they're going to relocate their entire, world, their life to a state like Texas. So they would sell that property in California, and they could buy a replacement property in Texas. And if they bought a property that was equal or greater in value to the one they sold in California, they would fully defer all their capital gains taxes and their California state income taxes by doing so. And so by doing that, they're allowed to take that savings, it's in this case the $300,000 in capital gains taxes they would have paid, and by reinvesting it, they're using it as a term-free, interest-free loan from state and federal government to buy bigger and hopefully more profitable property. And that's essentially really the goal in a 1031 exchange.
Yeah, it is really fascinating, actually. I heard of a story where someone had, an investment property in California that was, negative cash flow, weren't making any money. They were feeding the beast, took that money, brought it over here to Texas, to the great state of Texas, and were able to buy 100-unit apartment building, and then quickly, sold that, I think a few years later, and then bought a 200-unit property. So it's just crazy. So if there's, we've got listeners everywhere in the United States and of course outside of the United States. So if you're in California and you're feeding a beast, maybe it's time to think about, of course we can help you at dwelling, think about bringing that money into Texas and actually scaling up and buying something. Obviously reach out to Mike and Alex here to help you, kind of work out the mechanics of our 1031 exchange actually happens. So I think that's kind of like my next question, Alex, for you. So can you just kind of give us just, not overly too technical, just kind of give us like, the process of how a 1031 exchange actually occurs from kind of inception all the way to completion.
So again, let's start with the first thing you want to do is talk to your accountant, and that's what Michael always shares with all his clients. You'd be surprised how frequently we discourage people from doing 1031 exchange. For one example is if you're posting a loss, there's no value in doing 1031 exchange, right? So if there's we've seen some individuals with other QIs where they'll just take the money, the qualified intermediary, no matter if the person has a real benefit to 1031 exchange. So that's the first thing you want to know is, are you actually showing appreciation? So, and in order to be able to make sure you understand that, well, you need to know your adjusted basis and what would be the property that would be sold at this point. So the difference is, has the property actually appreciated in value? If it has, then it has appreciated enough for you to want to do a 1031 exchange. Typically, I think, Mike, correct me if you're wrong. If I'm sorry, no, you're not wrong. If I'm wrong, that's the rule. Mike is not wrong. So that's the point. I'm sorry?
To tell my wife that.
Well, my gosh, are our wives talking? Only the married men laughed at that. So the question here is, I think we typically recommend if a person is showing around $100,000 of capital gains, that's at that point you want to look into a 1031 exchange. Mike, would you comment on that, please?
Yeah, $100,000 is a good starting point, but I have done exchanges with people with less of a gain. I would say $50,000 to $100,000 is the starting point. Anything less than that, you have to compare. Our fees are fairly nominal. So the fees aren't really an issue. And so I've had people do exchanges where they've had $20,000 of gain and they're still saving money even after paying our fee. But usually $50,000 to $100,000 is a good starting point. And obviously, if you exceed that, it makes a lot more sense.
Right.
So step one, Ola, is just make sure that you have an actual gain. That's the number one thing. The second thing is you wanna at that point talk to a QI, like qualified intermediate, contact Madison 1031 to kind of talk about the strategy of the next steps. Because what's really crucial to understand is, as soon as if you make a sale of the property and you receive the cash in hand, the IRS recognize that you have the money to pay their taxes. And then we'll make sure, even if you take all the money and the next day you're going to reinvest in the great state of Texas, I'm sorry, the IRS has identified you as taking money out and you're immediately responsible in paying that capital gains. So we as a qualified intermediary make sure that that money stays in the market and therefore you're not going to be taxed. Those taxes deferred. So that's the second point, is make sure you talk to the QI before the sale because the QI will have to handle the sale in order to not receive the gains from the proceeds from the sale. Mike, can you talk about the 45 and the 180?
Yeah, so just real quickly to get started, it's a pretty simple process. So any time before you close, it has to be before the closing. That's critical. You need to contact the qualified intermediary. We typically just need a copy of the contract of sale, the title report if it's available, and we need to know who's closing the transaction. And then we typically, there may be some additional documentation. That's the starting point. And then we get our documents out to whoever's closing the transaction so that you sign them and execute them prior to the completion of the closing. Then from the closing of the sale, you have 45 days to identify up to 3 potential replacement properties, regardless of the value. Okay, you could go beyond that. The rules get a little bit more complex, but most of our investors are going to identify up to 3 potential properties. And they will have, from the closing of the sale, 180 days to close on any of those properties that they identified. And when they're ready to complete the closing on those properties, essentially we take assignment of the contract of sale and we fund the closing, and the deed goes directly to the taxpayer completing the exchange.
Awesome.
Boom.
Yeah, I wish we could. I wish we could keep going on and geeking out on 1031s, but we're definitely dwelling into the quick round. These are going to be quick questions, quick answers. You ready, sirs?
Ready.
All right. I'll start with you, Mike. First question: what makes you, Mike, unique? What is that differentiating factor that separates you from the next guy and the next girl? You can use your company too. And after you answer, then Alex, you can take on the next question.
But what makes me unique? I really devote myself, and this is on a business level, so I really devote myself to my clients. My favorite part of my job is the educational aspect. It's talking to folks like you on podcasts. It's doing live presentations. It's, getting on a phone call or a personal meeting with the client and figuring out how to make their transaction work. That's really what I'm all about, business-wise, is servicing the client and doing the best I can. Personally, I'm an active person. I'm outdoors as many hours as I possibly can be. I'm running, I'm paddle boarding, all kinds of fun stuff outside. That's kind of what drives me every single day.
Alex?
Yeah, I would say last night I was on a call for an hour with Mr. Esther Rozansky, who is the CEO of Madison 1031, with an individual who's going to a 1031 exchange with a different QI. So we spent an hour with not our client, helping him go through a problem that QI set him up for. So I think that's really unique for a company, Michael. And I love working for a company like that, where it literally, the head of the qualified intermediary, the company, will get on the call with a person who's not going to be a client in order to give them advice and help in how to navigate the station, which is quite challenging. So I think that really differentiates. There's a lot of great things about us in terms of security, in terms of access, in terms of making sure that the funds will be available to you. The communication is there. But at the heart of what we're doing is exactly what's happening now, what happened yesterday, which is we're educators at heart. And that's what separates us from, I think, other qualified intermediaries. In terms of on a personal level, I'm overweight and very low energy because I have 3 kids and ran a catering company for a long time. So I wish I was more like Mike and ate my Wheaties. So on a personal level, I really, really just spending time with my kids and doing wild, crazy things like trying to take them on adventures they'll never forget and hopefully survive.
Yeah, I think you both answered the really last question. So I'll give you the second question then. What was the last book that you read? And what was the one thing or nugget that you picked out from that book?
Well, the last book I actually read was by Ronan Farrow. I forget the title of it, but it was about international diplomacy in the United States State Department. It was very, very interesting. It just really drove home to me just how important diplomacy is to world peace and to improving the lives of people worldwide. It was really interesting, really good read.
Nice. I like that. Okay.
Alex.
Wow. So I read a book called Getting the Love You Want. It's around building a healthy, thriving marriage. And I think a point that was really stuck out to me is that we marry individuals that have an element of our personality that's been hidden away. So that partner is there to help us uncover our own personality. And I think that was really valuable as a person who comes from a divorced home and I have 3 young kids. Marriage is my number one priority of getting right, and everything else is secondary. So I try to get educated about it. Of course, when I have free time, I read scholarly books on 1031 exchanges, of course.
Yeah, no, I've got to check that out. I read the 5 Love Languages last year. I gave it to my wife, and then I've got another one pointing to my bookshelf here, and I've got the marriage book. I haven't started that. So yeah, I think that's really important, and definitely diplomacy as well. It's all important in everything we do in life. Marriage, business, self. So I really love those recommendations. You guys already answered, what you do for fun kind of questions. So the next thing is, I know you've mentioned this a little bit as well, but how can folks like me, find out more about what you guys, or even educational materials on 1031s, or just general information about you guys?
Yeah, so we have, our website is a great wealth of information on 1031 exchanges. It's madison1031.com. On there also, we have our blog, the Madison 1031 Zone. About every 3 to 4 weeks, we put a new article up there. You can subscribe to that blog as well for additional information. And you're always, we're always available. I'll let Alex, give his information as well, but we're always available for, phone call consultations, emails. We're on LinkedIn, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, so I live on LinkedIn. So the best way for you to reach out to me is Alex Jandrowski through LinkedIn. And we also release about a weekly basis educational 2-minute videos around hot topics like Airbnb and 1031 exchanges, syndicates and 1031 exchanges. So we really try to keep people up to date. A great way to reach out to me is alex@madison1031.com. But the best way is just send me a note from LinkedIn, and we'd love to get on a call. And obviously, if you also, Mike is in our headquarters in New Jersey, in New York area. I live remotely in Israel. So if you're ever in Tel Aviv and you want to go for a swim, I'll watch your stuff so it doesn't get stolen.
I wish I knew your last share, right?
I know. The time because the stars did not align.
Well, maybe next time. Well, guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking time out to, tell our listeners a little bit more about, 1031 exchanges. I really appreciate you so much.
Yeah, thanks. This has been fantastic. Thanks for having us on.